Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we have another The Furious Wild DLC preview video where we will take a look at the Nanman buildings. So, in the upcoming The Furious Wild DLC, we'll have a southwestern expansion on the map. And alongside that expansion is 21 counties that are designated as Nanman Land. And these counties will forever stay the Nanman Land regardless of who controls them. And these counties include the following. So you have the entirety of Jiangyang Commandery, including the city, lumberyard, farmland, and copper mine. The entirety of Yunnan Commandery, including the city, lumberyard, and iron mine. And the entirety of Zhangke's Commandery, alongside the city, tea plantation, and a trade port. And then from the Wuling Commandery, only the city itself is part of the Nanman Land, while everything in Fuling is part of the Nanman Land, including the city and livestock farm. And then the other weird one we have here is Jiaozhi, which only has the tea plantation and the lumberyard as part of the Nanman Lands. And finally, we have two completely new commanderies added into the game in Jianning, where we have a city, a copper mine, a spice trader, and an iron mine. Now take a moment to look at Jianning very carefully. This is the first time we ever had a commandery in the game that had 3 income producing counties within the commandery. So this will become the richest commandery in the game if built properly by the Han factions. For the Nanman people, the building options are a bit dated or primitive, let's say. So it's hard for you to maximize income in a fashion that you can with the Han factions. But as a Han faction, you can come conquer these land, and it will be equally lucrative for you as your other land. And finally, we also have Yongchang as a new commandery, which has another spice trader. So now we have officially 2 new spice traders, and from the old 3, 1 was taken away. So in total, we have 4 spice traders now in the south. So now there's going to be a bit of unbalance between spice income and silk income, where spice income is going to come out a bit ahead. But what exactly does these Nanman Land do if you can build the same Han buildings on it? Well, the big difference for the Nanman Land is that the settlement itself is going to look very different from a typical Han settlement. So aside from the look of a village, you'll also never have walls in these settlements. As you can see, small city and city does not contain walls. And you also will not get the base peasantry income that's included as part of the Han settlements. So no matter who owns these Nanman lands, in all the city settlements, you will not be able to upgrade your settlements to contain walls, thus you will not be able to stop one-turn siege battles. And if we see the upgraded versions, it does go up all the way to an equivalent of Imperial City, now called a Royal City. And you still get the same exact population cap of 7.5 million, 46 food, 150% income from commerce, 50 reserves, 50 points of prestige. All these stats are the same for each level with their corresponding Han buildings. You just don't have the peasantry flat income portion, and you don't have walls. So that's the key difference here. And if we look at one of the build panels here, we can see that for each of the 5 element categories of building, that is the purple industry buildings, the green agricultural land development buildings, the blue trade and learning buildings, the red military buildings, and the yellow government buildings, there are only 2 options for each. And for those of you who had seen our reform guide yesterday, you'll also know that each line within the economic reforms will restrict you to only one of these 2 building chains to be upgraded to level 5. The other one that you don't pick will only be able to upgrade their buildings to level 2 and sometime level 3 if you're able to mix and match the previous requisite reforms on the reform tablet. So for those of you who are unsure what I'm talking about, go check out the reform overview that was released yesterday, and all this will be made clear to you. And because of that, the way we're going to introduce this building overview is by looking at these buildings in groups. We'll look at 1 purple one, 1 green one, 1 blue one, 1 red one, and 1 yellow one, based on which side of the line they are on the reform tablet. So first up is the square line, which is the more Han-focused line, the one that hints at adaptation to the Han culture, versus the circle line, which features more of a embracing the primitive style. So first up in the industrial buildings, we have the labor guilds, and it starts from builders assembly and goes up in a linear progression all the way up to architects guild. And as you can see, it's very similar to the base game labor building. The only key difference here is you get construction time discount on top of population growth and percentage increase to industry. And another thing you might notice here is you will still get the Wuxing synergy for building. So you'll still get discounts to blue buildings by 20% once you have this constructed, which is quite interesting. And it still unlocks resources like artisans and industrialists and entrepreneurs to allow you to upgrade some of your small counties to tier 5. As all the county buildings are still the same as their Han versions in this game, the counties are never changed. The main settlement is where most of the building option differs. So moving on, we have the grain storage for the farming building. And here this goes from food store all the way up to a grand repository for linear progression as well. And the bonuses are quite interesting. There is a 30% increase to food from fishing, which means you would need fishing port or a harbor in the commandery to make use of this. And you'll get 150 income from peasantry as well as 120 reserve capacity. And the military building will also receive a cost reduction of 20%. This is the first time we're seeing base income being introduced for the Nanman faction in the 150 peasantry income. It's not a lot, but it is something. It is curious how the food percentage is only boosted for fishing and not for peasantry. So it kind of implies you're not really farming. You are probably a hunter and gathering society with fishing as one of your gathering method, and you're not really actually farming on the land. Thus, you don't get a farming multiplier to the peasantry income portion of your building. And moving on, we have the marketplace. And like the previous two buildings and every single building chain in the Nanman faction, it is a linear progression from craft merchant all the way to the level 5 traders guild. And this provides quite a lot of bonuses. You get a huge population capacity increase, which is very interesting in that you would need the extra 250k population from this building. And you also get 60 upkeep per turn in terms of cost, a penalty to public order, which is compounded to be worse given that you're increasing your population capacity at the same time. You do get plus 25% flat bonus to all food production. This would include farming, this would include fishing. And you also get a 150% multiplier to commerce and 50% to trade influence. So you're going to get a lot of income bonuses and a lot of population added into your town. And I guess the logic behind introducing a public order penalty is saying that the tribes might not like these foreign traders. And since we are on the square line of the reform tree, we are embracing more of the Han culture, and perhaps the locals resist this. So perhaps that's what's behind the design here. And there's an upkeep cost for hosting these traders guild, I believe. And I guess I can buy into the structure here. Although it is interesting how you have a sudden increase in population capacity when you go for a marketplace. Now moving on, we have the military version for this square line in the military infrastructure. There is a heavy upkeep cost for this building that's not there for the circle reform version, and that's going to be a trend. And the bonuses are quite similar between these two lines. It's very fair. You get extra recruitment capacity for all your animals, whether they are the 3 versions of elephants in the game or 2 versions of the tiger. You also get some military supplies for your own commandery as well as adjacent commandery, a nice 30% boost to industry, and a huge increase to your reserve capacity, which is another very interesting design concept because reserve capacity is meant to counter sieges. And given that none of us have walls, it's going to be very interesting to see how we even force enemy forces to siege us in the first place. And there's that heavy 100 upkeep cost per turn. And lastly, we have the government building for this reform line in the governing hall. And this will just basically improve our prestige, gives us a very little increase to research rate which is something I complained about yesterday in our reforms video. And we also get a penalty to public water, but we get a 500 boost to peasantry income, which is very interesting. And you also have an upkeep component here as well. So you get a little bit of everything, and I guess because you're governing your tribe similar to the Han faction, your people would not like you with the 6 points of public order hit. So it seems like if you go down this line, you're heavily focused on peasantry flat income, and you're also going to get hit with a lot of public order, which might slow down your population growth. The other bonuses are kind of all over the place, so let's reserve our judgment until we take a look at the circle line. So from the circle line in the economic building slot, or the purple buildings, we have the artisanal guilds, and this is from craft workshop all the way to artist guild. And this building increases your income from all sources by 25%, help reduce corruption in your own commandery as well as adjacent one by 15%, as well as a minus 25% construction cost discount to local commandery, and the upkeep cost would be 40 upkeep per turn. So ultimately, this is going to be your corruption reduction building, similar to a version of the state workshop for the Han factions. You also get a very nice 25% increase to all sources. The construction cost discount is also helpful. So whereas one version would be a construction time decrease, this version here is the construction cost decrease. But the key thing to note here is in both versions of the purple buildings, whether you take the square line in the reform or the circle line, you're going to be stuck with a building that does not produce any industry income at all. So if you're eventually going to conquer Han territory and you see that they already have a state workshop built, perhaps you don't want to get rid of that, as you do have ways to boost industry income, but you don't have ways to build stuff like state workshop to create base industry income for your factions. And moving on to land development, this goes from garden all the way up to city plantation. It provides a nice population growth to local county, up to 24k per turn, plus 5 food production from farming, plus 10% replenishment, and that's it. There is no peasantry income attached to this part. So the grain storage is generating income, but your city plantation is only producing you food, which is very strange, and I actually don't know which version is better. Obviously, you want a bit of income with your buildings, but the bonuses here are okay. You're getting a population growth, you're getting food, which might be essential depending on if you want to build tall or not. And looking at some of these buildings, maybe you just don't want to build tall. You're not going to get walls anyways. Going tall giving you more slots. If the building quality are like this, perhaps you don't want those more slots. The food cost is probably not going to be worth it. The replenishment bonus on this building, however, is quite nice, as even the level 2 version, which you can build without any reforms, will give you 4% replenishment, and that's a nice amount to have in the early game. And population growth obviously stack over time, so getting this building early might be the way to go. And moving on, we have what I think is the best building for the Nanman factions, and this is Places of Festivities, which is their blue building for the circle reform line. And this building gives you population growth, 25k for local county, so even more than the land development. You're getting 20% character experience boost faction-wide. You're getting 6 points of public order. You're getting 200 base commerce income, as well as 100% boost to all commerce income. So this is the first legitimate income building we have seen. And it also comes with a lot of other bonuses like public order, character experience, and 25k population growth. So I think this is really the best building out of all the Nanman faction buildings. So this has me leaning more towards getting the circle line versus the square line. Now, of course, the blue building is very different versus the other buildings, as the required reform is not the final reform on the line, but actually the penultimate reform, the one before the final reform. So technically you can still go for the square line, but at the very last reform, you can pick the circle option. That way you can get the level 5 Guild of Festivities while building the rest of your building to level 5 with the square reform. So you could mix and match with the versions of the blue building, but this is one case where one blue building, namely the Places of Festivities, is just a lot better than the marketplace version. And moving on, for the military version, we have Conscription, which I feel is also better than the military infrastructure building. To start, this does not cost 100 upkeep per turn. You also get +2 seasonal retinue deployment to allow you to redeploy armies or throw generals out there in emergencies. You will lose 24k population growth, but if you do go down the circle line, you can make up for it with places of festivities as well as land development, which both gives you population growth per turn. You also get the same +1 recruitment cap for all the elephant and tiger units, and +5 starting rank for all recruits in local armies. That is pretty huge to get those 5 levels early on for bonuses to morale, attack speed, ammo, and such. And you also get 12% replenishment in local commandery, as well as a full retinue. For the last one, the tier 5 building, the image was way too long, so I cropped out that part, but you still get a full retinue of unit to help defend your commandery. So in my opinion, the value of the blue building for the circle reform and the value of the red building already make me lean toward getting the circle reform almost every time when playing as the Nanman factions. And the last building we have here are sites of worship. This is the yellow version for the circle reforms, and this is a 50 upkeep costing building that gives you prestige, which matches the other version of the yellow building, 30 points. It gives you another 25k population growth, so you get a lot of population for going the circle route, and population obviously will boost all income sources, like how the game works with all factions. You also get plus 24 points of public water, keeping your population happy, thus allowing your population to continue to flourish even at high levels, as you get public water penalties when you have high population. And in your own commandery where this is built, you also get minus 25% to corruption, which will allow you to expand to bigger empires. So that's pretty neat. I feel like the last 3 buildings here for the circle reforms really shines and might be the way to go for most of your campaigns. And that wraps up all the buildings, and we have kind of looked at them all. And one thing to note here is that aside from the 200 points of commerce that we find in places of festivity, and the 500 points of peasantry in governing hall, and finally 150 points of peasantry in grain storage, there is actually no base income provided by any of the Nanman buildings. So you don't have to feel bad that all your buildings are locked behind the final reform on the reform tree that takes 19 turns, because the buildings aren't very good, even if you get them to tier 5. Most of your income is probably going to be based off post-battle loot, as well as income from the minor counties. So county income is going to be key. And if we jump back to where we listed out all the counties, we can see a pretty well balanced amount of different sources of income. We have 4 industry income producing counties, we have 4 peasantry income producing counties, and we have 3 commerce producing income counties. So commerce is going to get the most boost simply because the settlement itself will also give you a huge boost, and places of festivities will also give you additional 100%. Industry is still going to be solid by having a high base amount, and you can use the combination of population as well as both of the purple buildings, which both provide a bit of percentage boost to industry, I believe 30%, as well as the military infrastructure building, which will add another 30%. So there are definitely options for you to boost these county income, but don't expect the Nanman factions to become powerhouses. And even if you capture Han territories that are not Nanman land, let's say you expand beyond your Nanman territories, in those new commanderies that you capture, you can still only build the Nanman buildings. It's just that the settlement itself will be upgraded using the Han building. So when we talk about Nanman land, it really only affects the settlements. So Jiangyang City, Yunnan City, Zangke City, Wuling City, Fuling City, Jianning City, and Yongchang City. So these 7 cities are the only ones that are really affected by Nanman land, and all the counties are going to be fine whether you play as the Nanman or as the Han factions. And talking about Han factions, even if you play Han factions and you conquer these cities, they're still going to be Nanman cities. You're not going to be able to build walls. They're going to have to follow the same structure as a Nanman faction. You can build your other buildings there, like you can probably build your state workshop, you can build your private workshop, but you're just not going to get that base peasantry income from the city itself. That's the only key difference. So that wraps up our overview. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Tomorrow we'll be jumping back into game. We'll take a look at all the characters, namely the generic ones, since the Nanman factions are technically classless, and we'll take a look at the weapons they can use, the armors they can use, as well as their skill tree and their personal goals. So hope you guys enjoy this one, and see you guys tomorrow. Bye!